Veronica Miles, 66 years old, steps onto the polished jet bridge of Omnis Air Flight 822. She's dressed simply. Dark gray cashmere sweater, tailored black slacks, and low-heeled leather loafers, and her curly silver hair is pulled back in a neat bun. No designer label, no flash of jewelry. Just a woman who has seen too much to need any kind of announcement. She carries a small leather tote, nothing more, and passes through first-class cabin with a calm, steady gait. The pale blue overhead lights reflect off the glossy wood veneer and brushed metal accents. Plush cream seats recline in flawless symmetry, each with its own ottoman and fold-out tray. A discreet flight attendant stands at the front, offering bottled water. Another adjusts the overhead bins with professional precision. It is, in every way, the picture of luxury. Veronica pauses by seat 1A. Her fingers trace the stitch lines on the supple leather armrest. This seat, the very first in the cabin, is hers tonight. Not because she asked for an upgrade, not because of some VIP status. She earned it. And not 10 minutes after stepping aboard, she'll prove why. She settles in, places her tote in the overhead compartment, and slides into the seat. She feels the soft resistance of the cushion, its memory foam contouring around her frame. A small display lights up beside her, offering champagne, water, an array of snacks, everything you might expect in this exclusive section of air travel. She taps a couple of icons, confirming her pre-ordered meal. A perfectly cooked filet mignon with truffle butter, a side of haricots verts dressed with Meyer lemon zest, and a glass of vintage Bordeaux. The confirmation chime feels oddly hollow. Moments later, the cabin lights dim slightly as boarding completes. Veronica leans back and closes her eyes for a brief instant, breathing in the barely perceptible scent of new leather and filtered air. She's done this route a dozen times. Los Angeles to Chicago is one of Omnis Air's busiest domestic runs. But tonight is different. Tonight, she's here not as the CEO whose face appears on Forbes' World's Most Influential Leaders list, but as an observer in disguise. She wants to see, with her own eyes, how the engine she built behaves when no one knows her name. A soft chime signals drink service. A slender flight attendant in crisp Navy uniform approaches. Her name tag reads, Julie Reinhardt, in polished silver script. Julie offers a practiced smile, bright teeth, perfectly applied lipstick. She greets the passengers behind Veronica with warm precision. Mr. Emerson, Ms. Patel, welcome aboard. But when she reaches Veronica, she barely looks up. Hello, ma'am, Julie says. I'm sorry, but it looks like we've run out of your meal selection. We have cold chicken sandwiches and bottled water. Would you like that instead? Veronica opens her eyes. That polite tone, just polite enough to be insulting. She nods once, deliberately slow. Yes, thank you, she says softly. No anger, just fact. She hands over the confirmation printout from her tote. Julie glances at it for a flicker of a second, then tucks it away without apology. Watching Julie pivot and move on to the next seat, Veronica steadies herself. Passengers around her murmur, some intrigued, most oblivious. Behind her, a man in a crisp gray suit pats his lap and asks for another glass of Dom Perignon. No one asks Veronica if she's okay. No one wonders why the only woman in that row, the sole person of color, got the cheapest, coldest meal on the menu. She doesn't pick at the remnants of lettuce and dry chicken in the plastic container. Instead, she studies the cabin crew from the corner of her eye. A younger flight attendant, Tina, crosses the aisle with a tray of canapes for other guests, her expression blank when she passes Veronica. Then Tina fixes her makeup in the mirror at the front, smoothing lipstick, checking her reflection, before returning to serve. It is the universe laid bare. Rich passengers pampered, poor passengers ignored. all under the guise of first class. Veronica's pulse is steady. She brings her clenched fists to rest in her lap and lets her shoulders drop. She tastes not bitterness, but clarity. This is exactly why she's here. She remembers her first day as a flight attendant trainee, 45 years ago. A fresh college graduate, bright-eyed, eager, only to be told to clean up passenger spills while her male colleagues handed out pillows. She recalled the sting of being called sweetheart by men who never bothered to learn her real name. She left that job, got an MBA, founded Omnis Air so no new generation of young women would ever start their careers from the very bottom if they didn't have to. Tonight, she doesn't let that memory cloud her purpose. Instead, she lets it fuel her next move. She tucks the sandwich aside and reaches for the sleek smartwatch on her wrist. A slight twist of her thumb activates a hidden menu. She selects Clear Deck Protocol, the code word that no flight attendant is supposed to know. With a single tap, a secure message is sent to Omnis Air's central operations and HR teams. Flight 822, cabin crew audit, level, CEO override. Activate AI behavior monitoring immediately. She closes her eyes again, long enough to feel the hum of the plane's engines. Her mind is already several steps ahead. Data pipelines opening, surveillance cameras shifting focus, AI algorithms parsing every gesture and word uttered by the crew tonight. All of it will be compiled, time-stamped, cross-referenced, and ready for review by the time the wheels touch down in Chicago. She doesn't need applause. She only needs results. The rest of the flight goes on. Champagne flutes clink. Silver cloches are lifted for other guests. Soft jazz drifts over the cabin speakers. And Veronica Miles sits quietly in 1A, the picture of composure, as the engine she built begins its silent work of justice. By the time the seatbelt sign dings off, the seed of accountability has already been planted. And in less than an hour, she will reveal just why no one on this crew will have a future at Omnis Air. Veronica remained perfectly still in her seat long after the clink of the flight attendant's tray faded down the aisle. Her back pressed into the supple leather, she allowed the cabin's soft hum to wash over her, steadying her pulse. As the flight attendant moved on to serve champagne and caviar to the business travelers behind her, Veronica's expression never flickered. She did not call after Julie. She did not slam her fist on the armrest. She did not demand an apology. In that moment of quiet, every muscle in her body relaxed, even her jaw unclenched. She inhaled slowly through her nose, counting to 3, then exhaled through her mouth. The cool, filtered air felt like a balm against her skin. She folded her hands gently in her lap and let her shoulders drop. To anyone watching, she was simply a calm, seated passenger, content to wait for the seatbelt sign to switch off. But inside her mind, a storm raged with pinpoint clarity. She reviewed every detail. The exact words Julie had used, the careless way Julie had tucked the confirmation slip into her pocket, the tiny sneer that crawled across Julie's lips when she turned away. She noticed how Tina, the junior attendant, had glanced over Veronica's shoulder and then hurried past without offering a single crumb of comfort. She cataloged it all: tone of voice, body language, timing, knowing those data points would become evidence later. A soft chime announced the next phase of service. Veronica did not look up. She could almost imagine the tray trolley rattling down the center aisle, the scent of warmed butter and roasted garlic drifting toward her. But she made no move to call for it. No words left her mouth. She simply sat, arms resting lightly on the armrests, eyelids lowered, as if she were absorbing the cabin's ambient energy. Around her, passengers reclined, laughed, sipped their drinks. An older gentleman in a pinstriped suit told a joke to his companion. They leaned in close, elbows brushing as they shared the punchline. A businesswoman tapped away on her laptop, illuminated by the screen's glow. None of them looked her way. It was as if the very air around Veronica had rendered her invisible, precisely the morning's injustice replayed in high definition. She remembered vividly the first time someone had made her feel invisible. She was 18, working as a desk clerk at a regional airport. A traveler had stepped over her extended foot mat, barely noticing the young woman in uniform until she tripped, muttered, "Watch it, sweetheart," and stalked away without a glance. Back then, she'd knelt and wiped the spilled coffee, too young and startled to speak up. Not tonight. Tonight, she was the one who held the power. And yet she did not roar. She did not rage. She let the hurt seat itself quietly, in her bones, her lungs, her fingertips. It was the deepest kind of rage, the kind that fuels strategy rather than spectacle. A flight attendant approached once more, offering a refill of Perrier. Veronica lifted her hand politely and shook her head. She watched the attendant nod and move on. She noted the attendant's name badge, Camilla Soto, cabin crew ID OM347. Another data point for later. By now, nearly every seatbelt had clicked open. Passengers leaned forward, flossed toothpicks between teeth, leaned over to whisper goodnight prayers to a small child. A hush fell as the seatbelt sign toggled off. Veronica finally lifted her head and unfolded her legs. She stretched her arms overhead, body relaxed, her gaze sweeping the entire cabin. Every face, every uniform, every folding tray. Still, she did not speak. She did not rise to applause or complaints. She did not make a scene. Instead, she tapped a silent instruction into her smartwatch, an optional safeguard just in case someone tried to override her earlier command. The tiniest confirmation buzz met her skin. She allowed herself the barest hint of a smile as the device dimmed. In her mind, she rehearsed the steps she would take once they landed. The precise wording, the timing, the audience she wanted watching, but none of that escaped her lips yet. She could wait. She had learned long ago that the world listens best when you speak through action. And so she sat, alone yet unbowed, carefully observing the crew as they passed by. She noted the stiffness in Julie Reinhardt's posture now, a hint of unease. Tina's eyes darted twice toward seat 1A. Camilla's gait seemed just a fraction more hurried. Veronica filed each sign away, like a master archivist. The cabin lights shifted to a soft amber as dinner service continued. Veronica brushed a strand of silver hair from her face and met Julie's eyes for the first time since the denial. Julie's smile fluttered, uncertain. Veronica simply inclined her head, as if to say, "Carry on." But tonight, she was the one doing the carrying. And though no thunder cracked in the cabin, every mind aboard felt the hush before the storm. Veronica's calm was the calm of a tidal wave gathering strength, quiet, deliberate, inevitable. And somewhere deep inside, the pulse of justice began its steady crescendo, waiting for the moment to break free. Julie Reinhardt moved through the first-class cabin with the smooth confidence of someone who believed deeply in her own importance. Dressed in her perfectly tailored Navy uniform, with a crisp white scarf knotted at her neck and a name badge that caught the cabin lights. Julie Reinhardt? She embodied the image of Omnis Air's premium service. From her glossy magazine cover smile down to the precise way her shoes clicked on the aisle floor, every motion was choreographed for maximum elegance. But behind those polite gestures lay an undercurrent of cold dismissal, a subtle but unmistakable message that not everyone in 1A belonged. Julie paused in front of Veronica's seat, barely a hair's breadth away. She leaned slightly, just enough to read the small print on Veronica's meal confirmation. Then she glanced at Veronica herself, eyes narrowing in a microsecond of appraisal. Her lips curved into a practiced, effortless grin that froze the moment it registered more of condescension than courtesy. "Ms. Miles," she said in a tone that was too bright, too rehearsed, "I'm so sorry we're out of your pre-ordered entree tonight. I can offer you a chicken sandwich and bottled water." The words landed like ice cubes in Veronica's lap, each syllable crisp and unemotional. Julie's voice dropped to a whisper as she straightened up, but Veronica could hear every inflection. "I hope that works for you," Julie murmured, then pivoted gracefully to continue her rounds, her back a poised argument that Veronica was nothing more than an afterthought. The flight attendant flicked her perfectly manicured fingers at a tray trolley behind her, signaling the junior crew member, Tina, to press forward with the canopy. As those silver trays glided past Veronica's seat, each one felt like another layer of veneer separating her from the comfort and respect she'd earned. Behind Julie's back, the cabin hummed with contented murmurs. Passengers reclined in their seats as though nothing had happened. Mr. Emerson, in 1C, raised an eyebrow, prompted by Julie's attention, and said, "Well, isn't that swell? Chicken sandwiches for the big boss." He laughed and clinked the champagne flute offered by another attendant. Julie's lips curved into a conspiratorial smile directed at him, a silent pact that affirmed Mr. Emerson's assumption. The person in 1A was not part of their exclusive club. Veronica watched Julie's every movement, mental notes lining up like clues in a dossier. She noticed the slight tilt of Julie's head when she offered a refill of wine to the white female guest in 1D. The extra sparkle Julie feigned in her eyes as she engaged that passenger in friendly banter about their upcoming meeting in Chicago. But at Veronica's seat, there had been none of that warmth, none of that brightness, only a clipped apology and a plastic clamshell. It was modern discrimination, veiled under a veneer of impeccable service. Tina paused a few rows back, adjusting her tray of petit fours, and when she glanced at Veronica, her expression was blank. No hint of regret, no tremor of empathy. Instead, she shifted her weight onto one foot and picked up speed, eager to return to the side where real VIPs sat. It was a small gesture, but Veronica's heart tightened at the sight. Here in the first-class section of Omni's Air's flagship flight, she was the one person overlooked, dismissed, rendered invisible by people whose job was precisely to see and serve her. In that stillness, Veronica allowed herself a moment of quiet fury. She recalled the countless times early in her career she'd been the one looked past, the intern who brought coffee but never got invited into the meeting room, the minority founder assumed to be the PR person rather than the CEO. She remembered how deeply it had stung each time, but those memories were tempered now by strategy and resolve. She would not raise her voice. She would not make a scene. Instead, she collected evidence in her mind, the tone of Julie's apology, the hesitation in Tina's steps, the laughter of privileged customers. Every detail would be cataloged and logged. Julie finished her service round and paused near the bulkhead to speak softly with the cabin supervisor. Veronica caught a few words, irrelevant, not up to standard, a harsh judgment that hung in the air. The supervisor nodded and they exchanged a glance that spoke volumes. Aesthetic standards mattered. Human dignity did not. They walked away together, shoulders squared, leaving Veronica isolated in the very seat she had earned. She rested her hand on the armrest and let her fingers drift to her smartwatch, feeling the cool metal under her skin. The seeds of her plan were already planted. She would not allow this slight to go unaddressed. Above all, she understood the only way to rewrite the narrative was to let action speak for her. She pressed the side button and, in a single, silent gesture, confirmed the override. Her inner voice was calm but fierce. They will answer for this. They will not forget who sits in 1A. As the cabin lights dimmed further for the in-flight movie, Veronica leaned back and watched Julie Reinhardt resume her zealous professionalism. Julie unfolded a blanket for a passenger 3 rows ahead, carefully fluffed the pillow, and engaged in polite conversation about the passenger's weekend plans. Meanwhile, Veronica's sandwich remained untouched. She took a slow breath, savoring the tension. In the warm glow of the reading lamp above her head, Veronica closed her eyes for an instant. She pictured the sequence she'd set in motion. Data capture, cabin-wide behavior analysis, prompt HR notifications. The roles were reversed now. The very people who had erased her dignity would soon find themselves recorded, reviewed, and held accountable. Julie Reinhardt, unaware of the storm building around her, walked past Veronica one last time, offering a curt nod. Veronica returned the nod, measured, composed, yet unyielding. Behind that quiet greeting lay the truth. In this silent exchange, Veronica had already claimed victory. The unseen power she wielded was a far more potent weapon than any raised voice, and in the sections of that cabin that night, justice would arrive. Without a shout, just the decisive tapping of a CO's smartwatch and the unwavering resolve of a woman who refused to be invisible. The cabin lights dimmed for the mid-flight service, bathing the first-class section in a gentle amber glow. Veronica Miles sat perfectly upright in 1A, her posture as unwavering as her resolve. Around her, plush seats reclined, feet rested on ottomans, and passengers chatted quietly about business and family. But for Veronica, there was no moment of relaxation, only a sharp awareness of every sound, every flicker of movement. Julie Reinhardt reappeared, trolley in hand, her navy uniform impeccable, her smile rehearsed. She paused at 1A, glanced at Veronica's empty tray, and then at the untouched silver cloche in her other hand. With a soft click, she set the cloche down before Veronica, only to lift it again immediately, revealing nothing. The expected filet mignon and truffle butter were gone. Instead, Julie reached into the cart and produced a flimsy plastic box containing a wilted chicken sandwich. The lettuce was soggy, the bread uneven, and a single napkin lay haphazardly beside it. Veronica watched the small scene unfold, Julie's demonstration of service, with the same calm, steely gaze she brought to every challenge. "I'm really sorry," Julie said, her tones syrupy sweet as she placed the container on Veronica's tray table. "It seems our premium meals sold out faster than anticipated." She leaned in just enough that Veronica caught the faintest scent of Julie's expensive perfume, mingled with the stale aroma of reheated chicken. Then Julie straightened, gave Veronica a quick nod, and turned away to attend to seat 1B. Julie's back was still turned when one of the guests, a sharply dressed man in a charcoal suit, whispered to his companion, loud enough for Veronica to hear. "Looks like someone couldn't quite keep up with our booking system." He let out a soft chuckle, and the woman beside him glanced over the top of her champagne glass, her eyes flickering in Veronica's direction for a fraction of a second before she dismissed her with a perfumed snort. A roar of laughter rippled through those nearest them, as though Veronica's discomfort were the punchline of an inside joke. Veronica pressed her lips together, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her reaction. She placed the plastic box carefully to one side and unfolded the napkin. She could feel every eye in the cabin flicking past her, registering the incongruity. The woman in 1A, first class, reduced to a sad sandwich meant for economy. A younger flight attendant, Tina, skirted past with a tray of caviar-topped blinis. As she approached the couple behind Veronica, Tina paused, her expression neutral, then leaned in conspiratorially to whisper, "Enjoy your meal, sir," before scurrying off without so much as a backward glance. The humiliating absence of even the smallest courtesy felt like a physical blow. Veronica's heart hammered for a moment, perhaps the only moment she permitted herself to feel vulnerable. She recalled the first time she'd ever felt truly invisible. A teenager in a high-end hotel lobby, summoned only to clear away coffee cups while rich guests smiled over her shoulder. That memory flickered and died, burned away by the cold iron of her present purpose. She inhaled, exhaled, and let her gaze sweep over the cabin once more. Nearby, a passenger whipped out his smartphone and began recording, a gleaming screen held high like a trophy. He murmured, "Man, can you believe this?" and zoomed in on the sandwich. Within seconds, heads turned, some in curiosity, others in disdain. A hush settled, the hum of the engines seeming to recede. Veronica felt the collective scrutiny settle on her like ice, and still she did not speak. Rather than crumble, Veronica allowed the humiliating moment to crystallize in her mind, each pang fueling her determination. She closed her eyes briefly and felt the familiar surge of control. Rationale overtaking raw emotion, strategy outpacing indignation. She remembered why she'd built Omnisair: to ensure that nobody who sat in 1A would ever be made to feel less than human. Julie moved away, her baggage cart rickety on the plush carpet, but not before she cast a fleeting glance back, a look of mild annoyance, as though Veronica had spoiled Julie's evening. Veronica opened her eyes in time to see Julie offer an elegant nod to her supervisor, as if to say, "Everything's under control." While her supervisor nodded back, eyes trained on Veronica's seat, as though studying a curiosity. A hush lingered as passengers opened their meals, individually wrapped chocolates, warmed lobster bisque, tableside piano music soft through the speakers. Veronica did not reach for her box. She did not let the smell of stale chicken pass her lips. Instead, she let the box sit, an undeniable symbol of the wrong done to her. Her breathing was calm, measured. The humiliation was not lost on her, far from it. But it was bounded, contained. It would become ammunition. She would transform the injustice into proof, the slight into leverage. Just then, Tina zipped by again, this time dropping a linen napkin, an extra, in the seat pocket in front of Veronica. It fluttered down as though by accident. Veronica picked it up, unfolded it, and let it rest on her lap. The gesture offered a fleeting spark of recognition, an unconscious olive branch from someone who dared to see, but Tina did not meet her gaze. She darted on, looking anywhere but at 1A. Veronica laid the napkin aside. She rested her palm flat on the armrest and let her gaze settle forward, straight through the closed door of the cockpit and into the hush behind it. She could almost sense the gears turning in her mind, the satellite link to Omnis's operations center, the algorithms indexing every word spoken, the human resources team reading the transcript in real time, and the passengers. They began to murmur among themselves, some in sympathy, some in schadenfreude. A soft tension had rippled through the cabin. For a moment, neither engines nor air conditioning, nor soft jazz could drown it out. Veronica let that tension hang in the air. She did not offer comfort, nor did she ask for it. She remained seated, the embodiment of quiet authority in the midst of public shaming. When Julie Reinhardt finally disappeared down the aisle, Veronica closed her eyes for a heartbeat. She pictured the exact moment she would take her next step, the moment when she would reveal her identity in full, not with bluster, but with unassailable fact. She pressed a tiny button on her smartwatch, double-checking that the ClearDeck protocol was still active in the system. A final hush fell as the seatbelt sign flicked on again, signaling turbulence ahead. The moment was over. Life at 30,000 feet resumed. Drinks were refilled, blankets handed out, soft voices returned. But for Veronica Miles, the scene of humiliation had already done its work. It had laid bare the truth of the system she had built, and the cruelty it allowed to fester. Now, armed with every detail she had observed. She was ready to strike. She leaned back, calm once more, her eyes distant but resolute. She would not let this moment pass into the shadows. It would be the spark that ignited the reckoning. One gentle, devastating blow at a time. The gentle hum of the engines faded into the background as a low murmur spread through the first-class cabin. Veronica sat rigidly in 1A, her back pressed against the smooth leather, eyes fixed straight ahead. But just behind her, a ripple of whispered conversation rose, and she could almost taste the contempt in the cool, recycled air. A sharply dressed man in seat 2A leaned toward his companion, voice barely above a breath yet loud enough for Veronica to hear. Who does she think she is, sitting up there? His companion, a woman in silk and pearls, smirked, sipping her champagne as if to savor every drop of the slight. Maybe she found a bargain upgrade, the woman murmured, eyes flicking to Veronica's simple sweater and slacks. First class. You'd think they'd have a dress code. Veronica's jaw tightened imperceptibly. She did not turn to face them. She did not allow herself the luxury of visible dismay. Instead, she sat as still and calm as a statue, letting their words hang in the air like a noose. In her lap, the plastic sandwich box felt heavier than steel. A few rows forward, an elderly couple exchanged knowing glances, their expressions a mix of pity and amusement. He patted his wife's hand and whispered so that only she could hear. It's like watching a cat in a lion's den. The pity, so patronizing, cut deeper than any insult. Veronica closed her eyes for a moment, recalling the first time pity had been offered to her after a hard-knock pitch meeting. She had stood her ground, but the sting of being underestimated had never left her. Tina, the junior flight attendant, appeared beside Veronica once more, this time with a folded linen napkin intended for economy. She held it out, eyes avoiding contact. "Here, ma'am," Tina said, voice flat. "If you need anything else, let me know." But her tone implied that nothing more would ever come. She turned on her heel and walked away, her heels clicking with callous finality. Veronica watched Tina's retreating figure. She noted the uniform's crisp creases, the way Tina's shoulders didn't stoop. Not a shred of empathy. Each step Tina took reinforced a glaring truth. For these people, respect was a privilege extended only to those deemed worthy of attention. A child 3 rows back let out a small giggle. The boy pointed at Veronica's tray. "Mom, why does she have a tiny lunch?" His mother shot him a sharp look, whispering a reprimand, but the damage was done. Veronica felt the humiliated throb in her chest. She pressed her lips together, taste of iron lingering at the back of her throat. Her mind drifted to the moment 8 years ago when she had watched her own daughter, then 12, stride onto a plane for the first time and be mistaken for the flight attendant's assistant because of her age and skin color. Veronica had fumed, but she had also taught her daughter that dignity was not earned by shouting. It was proven by action. She opened her eyes and let them scan the cabin. Cell phones raised, some passengers recording the scene, others leaning forward in silent curiosity. Not one person had stood up in her defense. The absence of allies was as loud as any jeer. It was clear, if she wanted justice, she would have to deliver it herself. Veronica lifted her right hand, flexing her fingers, then placed them lightly on her smartwatch. The clear deck protocol was humming quietly in the background, collecting data, building a case. But she would not call attention to it yet. Part of her strategy was to let the crew believe they'd won, to revel in the illusion of impunity before the wind turned. From above, the overhead bins caught the soft cabin lights. Veronica let her gaze trace the compartments, each one holding a piece of luggage, a story, a life. a privilege. And in the same space she sat with nothing but the weight of a plastic sandwich and her own unspoken power. Julie Reinhardt reappeared at the front of the cabin, clipboard in hand. She paused, scanning the rows as if performing a final check. Veronica watched Julie's eyes flicker toward her seat, an almost imperceptible hitch in Julie's practiced composure. Then Julie's mouth curved into that gleaming smile and she nodded once, crisply, before moving on. Veronica allowed herself a tiny smile in return. So faint, it could have been mistaken for a trick of the light. She had planted the seed of accountability. Now she would let it grow. As the seatbelt sign flickered back on, passengers settled once more. The ashtray lids snapped shut, glasses were set upright, and the cabin returned to its polite routine. But something had shifted. A subtle current of anticipation passed through the air, like the moment before an announcement no one saw coming. Veronica pulled the sandwich box closer and closed the lid as though to contain the memory of this indignity. Tomorrow, the headlines would read about a flight crew suspended mid-air by a CEO they never recognized. Tonight, though, she would sit quietly, turning this cruel chapter into the prelude of her silent, all-powerful reckoning. In 1A, the lone woman who had been treated as an afterthought settled back into her seat. The hum of the engines rose again, steady and unrelenting. And deep within, Veronica's resolve burned brighter than any spotlight. Calm, controlled, and absolutely unstoppable, Veronica sat back in 1A, eyes closed, breathing slowly. In the dim amber glow of the cabin, the world felt suspended. Passengers whispered around her, champagne glasses chimed, and the engines thrummed like a distant heartbeat. But inside her, an entirely different rhythm played out. One of resolve, of memories resurrected, and of a plan taking shape. She remembered her first pitch meeting at age 27 in a glass-walled boardroom in Palo Alto. She'd walked in confident, armed with a prototype AI security platform, only to have the room go silent when she introduced herself. The questions came not at her innovation but at her accent, her appearance, even her name. "Are you here to take notes?" someone had asked. She'd smiled, handed out printed slides, and said, "No, I'm here to lead the conversation." The lesson was seared into her. Power respects preparation and calm authority. A soft click sounded as Julie Reinhardt stepped into the aisle again. Veronica opened her eyes, watched Julie's heels click on the carpet, and let her gaze drift to the window. Outside, small city lights blinked below the wings, a world unaware of the drama at 35,000 feet. Veronica's fingers absently traced the gold inlay on her smartwatch. She thought of the countless hours she'd spent building Oma's Air from scratch, coordinating fleets of engineers, negotiating airport slots, winning over skeptical investors who all said, "An airline run by a woman of color? That's a risk." She'd answered each doubt with data, reliability stats, profit forecasts, customer surveys, and with action, launching routes that larger carriers ignored, forging partnerships in emerging markets, and delivering the kind of service that had once delivered her daughter's medical supplies to a remote clinic in Mississippi. And yet tonight, here she was, seat 1A of her own airline, reduced to a secondary thought. She allowed the slight to settle in her bones, filling her chest with a cold clarity. This wasn't a moment for fury, it was a moment for strategy. She inhaled deeply. The insulated calm she'd practiced in boardrooms, on trading floors, and in crisis rooms all converged. Her mind ran through steps already cued: data capture, witness collection, procedural protocol. It was as familiar as breathing. Another memory surfaced. The first time she'd been passed over for promotion in her previous life as a corporate executive. She'd watched a less qualified colleague ascend while she remained at her desk, working late nights and weekends. She felt the sting of betrayal, the urge to explode in righteous anger. Instead, she crafted a white paper detailing operational inefficiencies, presented it to the board in person, and won not only a promotion but the power to revamp the department. She remembered their faces when she announced budget reallocations the next quarter. They'd learned respect that day without a single raised voice. Just performance. Veronica glanced at the untouched plastic box on her tray. It had been almost an hour since she'd been served that meager chicken sandwich while everyone around her dined on lobster bisque, filet mignon, and caviar-topped blinis. The sight still seared, but she had no intention of wasting her energy on dwelling. Instead, she had refined that memory into proof. She flexed her fingers, thinking of the AI-driven audit quietly compiling behavioral data. Voice inflection logs, time-stamped service intervals, video snippets of Julie's micro-expressions. By the time they landed, OmniSair's analytics center would have a crystal-clear record. Who spoke to her, how long they hesitated, which gestures betrayed bias. The modern boardroom preferred graphs and charts to confront human failing. A hush fell as cabin attendants began clearing trays from dinner service. Veronica watched Tina return, lifting a silver cloche from the trolley and offering it to another passenger, someone Julie had greeted by name minutes ago. Tina's movements were efficient, mechanical even. Veronica saw the faint flutter of regret cross Tina's eyes when her gaze flicked in her direction, only to vanish under the weight of routine. She filed that mental note too, a potential ally, someone who felt a twinge of conscience. Veronica leaned forward, elbows on the armrests, and inhaled the cabin's warm breeze. Her heart rate was steady. This was not vengeance, it was accountability. She whispered to herself, let them speak through their actions. She envisioned the moment she would lay out the evidence, a concise slide deck, projected on a screen in the boardroom, each chart showing disparities in service. It would be impossible to deny, and in that room the same board that had once hesitated to back her vision would see the truth of systemic bias. She remembered the loyalty of her executive assistant, Aaliyah, tapping into global security feeds at 2:00 AIEM to cross-check passenger manifests. She remembered the pep talk before Aaliyah boarded the flight. Watch everything. If anything goes wrong, I want the time-stamped footage. Aaliyah had worked quietly behind the scenes for years, turning Veronica's hunches into hard data. Now that groundwork was bearing fruit. A soft tone from her smartwatch confirmed the data stream was active. Veronica closed her eyes again and recited the steps in her mind. Secure data capture via AI sensors. Tag all relevant recordings under Flight 822 crew conduct. Send encrypted report to HR and legal. Initiate immediate suspension protocol. She allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The hush around her was the calm before a storm. Her storm, built from precision rather than passion. A ripple of applause rose behind the curtain dividing first class from business class, where a short film screening had concluded. Veronica opened her eyes as Julie Reinhardt swept past her once more, tray trolley empty now, and approached another passenger. Julie's shoulders had stiffened. She moved with a hint of caution now, as though she sensed she was under observation. Veronica returned her attention to the pale blue display beside her seat. She tapped a note into her tablet. Document, Julie Reinhardt, Attitude Assessment, timestamp 22:15. It was sterile and clinical, but in that digital ledger lay the power of truth. The seatbelt sign flickered on again. The captain's voice crackled overhead. Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent into Chicago. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. Passengers clicked their belts into place. The cabin buzzed with anticipation of touchdown. Veronica exhaled, rising to her feet, just enough to tighten the belt over her hips. She stood composed, with the same quiet confidence she had shown when she founded Omnis Air. She would land, not as a victim, but as a verdict, one that would echo through every boardroom in the company. She took a last look around the cabin, Julie Reinhardt at the front, glancing at her clipboard as if searching for one more excuse. Tina folding empty trays, with care but without warmth. The passengers, some curious, some oblivious. Veronica nodded once, to herself, to them, to the system that had failed her. Then she prepared for the final move. She would not shout. She would not storm the cabin. She would simply act. And in that action, their own words and deeds would become the judgment. As the plane angled downward toward Chicago's runway, Veronica Miles, CEO of Omnis Air, felt the steady pulse of justice beneath her calm exterior. The cabin was quiet now. Plates had been cleared, glassware stowed, and the soft hum of the engines took center stage. Veronica sat poised in 1A, her fingers lightly resting on the armrest, the plastic sandwich box long forgotten at her side. Her smartwatch glowed faintly against her skin, a digital heartbeat in the stillness. All the pieces of her plan were in place. Now it was time for the final move. She tapped the screen twice, confirming the activation of what she had codenamed Clear Deck Protocol. In that instant, layers of secure AI monitoring flashed to life. Voice-toned analysis, gesture recognition, service timing logs, all focused on crew ID 822. A tiny buzz on her wrist signaled success. The invisible net was cast. Veronica lowered her hand and pressed the discreet call button built into her seat. A soft chime echoed through the first-class cabin. Moments later, Julie Reinhardt appeared at her side, clipboard in hand, and her practiced smile firmly in place. "Ms. Miles," Julie began, voice too bright. "Can I get—" Veronica held up a single finger, politely silencing her. Julie's smile faltered for the first time that flight. She blinked, confused, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. "Actually," Veronica said, voice low but carrying the full weight of authority, "I called you here because I have something to show you." She reached into her sweater pocket and drew out a sleek metal badge on a fine chain. Veronica Miles, Chief Executive Officer, Omnis Air. She placed the badge gently on the tray table between them. Julie's jaw tightened. Her eyes widened, darting from the badge to Veronica's calm face. The cabin seemed to hold its breath. Veronica leaned forward. "You served me this," she said, pointing at the wilted chicken sandwich. "Instead of the steak and wine I ordered and paid for, you treated me like I was invisible." She paused, letting the words settle in the charged air. "What you didn't know was that the person in 1A tonight is the CEO of this airline." A ripple of astonished murmurs moved through the cabin. A passenger in 1C gasped, another fumbled with a smartphone, recording every second. The soft amber lights clung to Veronica's silhouette, turning her into a quiet spotlight. Julie swallowed, mouth opening but finding no words. The tape recorder of her mind must have stalled. Veronica continued. "Your behavior is a direct violation of our values and our policies. You are hereby terminated, effective immediately." She pressed her smartwatch again. "Lock all access credentials for Crew 822. Notify HR and legal to begin immediate removal protocol. We will reconcile all bonus payouts at year's end, but you will no longer board any Omnis Air aircraft." Julie's face went pale. She glanced at her fellow crew members. Tina, eyes wide and unsteady. Camilla, standing frozen by the service cart. Eric, who had been polishing silverware moments before, now gripping his tray trolley as though it might shield him. One by one, the cabin crew realized this was no routine reprimand. Their carefully rehearsed professionalism crumbled. Tina opened her mouth to speak but closed it again, tears gathering in her eyes. Camila's shoulders sagged. Julie looked down at the badge on the table, then back at Veronica, as though seeing her for the very first time. A brisk figure in a dark blazer appeared at the forward bulkhead door. Omnis Air's HR manager, accompanied by a legal advisor. The manager carried a tablet displaying the instant report, time-stamped notes on Julie's curt apology, service time deltas, audio clips of derisive laughter. The legal advisor held a printed directive. Per CEO order, all crew 822 immediately suspended pending investigation. Veronica did not smile. She sat back, arms folding across her chest, as though nothing remarkable had happened. "Thank you," she said softly to the HR manager, who nodded briskly and advanced toward the crew. Verbal goodbyes were unnecessary. The HR manager quietly instructed Julie and her teammates to remove their name tags and follow him off the plane. The hush in the cabin deepened as the crew complied, each step a testament to the gravity of their situation. Passengers watched, some with stunned admiration, others with gleeful schadenfreude. A white-gloved hand hovered over a champagne flute, as though frozen by disbelief. A travel writer in 2B tapped a note into her laptop. "Unbelievable. CEO fires crew mid-air." Veronica could almost feel the adrenaline in the cabin's collective bloodstream. When the last crew member disappeared through the forward door, the HR manager pressed a button on his tablet. The cabin's internal intercom crackled. "Crew 822 has been officially terminated. Replacement staff are en route to meet Flight 822 upon landing. Thank you for your patience." The announcement landed like thunder. Veronica took a deep breath and released it slowly. She did not gloat. She had no desire for theatrics. Her calm presence, her unwavering composure, spoke louder than any spectacle. She watched the serene faces of her fellow passengers once more as they absorbed the reality. The airline they trusted had corrected itself mid-flight, guided by its founder's quiet resolve. She closed her eyes, feeling the subtle tilt as the pilot lowered the flaps in preparation for descent. In her mind, she reviewed the next steps. Debrief with HR, publish internal report, schedule a company-wide town hall. But none of that mattered in this moment. The system had spoken its own truth. Veronica slipped the badge back into her pocket and pressed the call button again. When a steward arrived, she said simply, "Please bring me the menu for snacks and beverages." The steward, one of the replacement crew members who had just boarded, smiled nervously and complied. As the new attendant moved on, Veronica leaned back into her seat and wrapped her fingers around the armrest. She let the tranquility return, the knowing that justice had been done. No speeches, no press release mid-flight, just one quiet call, one reveal of identity, and a swift recalibration of the airline's moral compass. Around her, the cabin settled into an awed silence. Veronica Miles closed her eyes, a single tear gliding down her cheek, not of sorrow, but of profound satisfaction. She had sat in silence, endured humiliation, and then orchestrated change with a calm precision no one could ignore. The runway lights of Chicago glittered ahead through the cockpit windows, and in the stillness of Seat 1A, Veronica felt the steady pulse of her own power. Proof that true leadership requires neither loud proclamations nor empty gestures, but the quiet confidence to act when it matters most. The cabin door hissed closed behind the escorted crew, and for a moment the only sound was the soft click of seatbelts being refastened. Veronica Miles leaned back in 1A, folding her hands calmly in her lap. Around her, passengers exchanged astonished glances. Some whispered encouragement, others stared in stunned silence. The ripple of that moment was only just beginning. A young couple near the window leaned toward each other, their eyes wide. "Did you see that?" the woman murmured. Her partner nodded, one hand still gripping a tablet showing a live news feed. Breaking: CEO fires entire crew mid-air. On the screen, the cabin camera footage played in a loop, Veronica's steady voice juxtaposed against Julie Reinhardt's frozen look of disbelief. Tweets scrolled beneath. Flight 822, Seat 1A, Omnisair trending worldwide. Far from the cabin's tight rows, in Atlanta's Omnis Tower, an alert pinged across the triad of screens in the war room of operations. Aaliyah Grant, Veronica's executive assistant, watched the first audit report received notification flash on her dashboard. She glanced at the clock, 6:15 p.m., and tapped a secure line to human resources. Within seconds, the head of HR and the general counsel joined her via video call. "Report just came through," Aaliyah said quietly, though her voice carried steel beneath the calm. Julie Reinhardt, 2 prior complaints, significant service delays, recorded micro-expressions consistent with bias, timestamped audio too. The HR chief frowned. "We'll need to prepare suspension notices, draft a statement." The general counsel leaned forward. "Also need to notify regulatory affairs. Department of Transportation will want a full briefing." Back on Flight 822, a replacement flight attendant appeared at Veronica's side, a fresh-faced young woman with apologies ready on her lips. "Ms. Miles, can I offer you anything? Tea, coffee, snack?" Veronica shook her head, permitting only, "A glass of water, please?" But her eyes scanned the cabin, noting how the air had changed. Formerly confident staff now avoided eye contact. Passengers now leaned forward in curiosity or silent solidarity. In the business lounge behind the cabin curtain, a well-dressed man tapped out an email on his laptop. "If Omnis Air can discipline a full crew mid-air, what does that mean for our partnership?" He added, "Let's convene at 8 a.m. tomorrow. This has serious implications." That message flew immediately to an investment group's channel, triggering a flurry of responses. At Omnisair's finance department, screens lit up with real-time alerts. Searches for Omnisair stock spiked 300%. One ticker showed a slight uptick on news of firm leadership resolve. The CFO, on a call with the airline's largest shareholder, explained calmly, "This is a demonstration of zero tolerance. We anticipate a short-term market reaction, but long-term brand reinforcement." Meanwhile, the cabin's soft intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the earlier disturbance. Replacement crew is on duty. We appreciate your patience." A hush fell. Veronica inhaled the recycled air and let it out slowly, feeling the confluence of data streams and human voices merge into a single wave of accountability. Back at Omnius Tower, Aaliyah ended the HR call and dialed the PR director. "We need a concise release, no fluff. Acknowledge the incident, support the CEO's directive, commit to full transparency." The PR director's lips tightened. "Understood. Draft in 10 minutes." In the back rows of the cabin, a passenger tapped into a group chat. Anyone else amazed? That was the CEO up front. She didn't shout, she just announced and executed. Emojis of applause and fire emojis confirmed the sentiment. A fellow traveler replied, "That's CEO-level power play, respect." Indoor Wi-Fi in Flight 822, social media blew up. Screens on tablets and phones showed headlines from major outlets. Aviation Daily, Omnis Air overhaul, CEO executes, crew mid-air. The Wall Street Update. Leadership lessons at 30,000 feet. Travel Insider. Passenger CEOs. When power flies first class. Passengers leaned in. Some even paused the in-flight movie on personal screens to scroll. A retired senator in 2B tapped Veronica's shoulder with a quiet, "That was textbook." She nodded, politely, but did not speak. Her calm aura remained unshaken. At 6:30 p.m., Flight 822 began its final descent. Veronica watched the city lights of Chicago shimmer against the dusk sky through the cockpit windows. She pressed one last command on her smartwatch. "Confirm report sent to board. Schedule town hall tomorrow." A soft buzz acknowledged the scheduling. Downstairs, in Omnis Air's boardroom, chairs automatically pulled out for an emergency teleconference. The board chair's tablet lit up with Veronica's message. "CEO, override protocol executed on Flight 8222. Full audit report attached. Meeting at 8 a.m. CST to discuss next steps." Briefcases snapped open, digital tablets loaded the audit, full with video clips and analytic charts illustrating each lapse. The board accepted the data without debate. This was the evidence they needed. Back in the cabin, the replacement crew distributed bottled water and warm smiles. A new attendant gently placed a plush throw over Veronica's shoulders. Through the lens of that soft gesture, Veronica allowed herself a fleeting moment of quiet satisfaction. The final act of service had arrived, and it had come from those who recognized dignity, not from those who had dismissed it. Passengers straightened in their seats. As the landing gear engaged, Veronica pressed the call button one last time. When the attendant knelt at her side, she simply said, "Thank you for handling that so professionally." The attendant's grateful smile was genuine, unguarded. As wheels touched runway and the cabin shuddered with touchdown, the murmurs erupted into soft applause. Veronica allowed a single nod. Then she rose, gathered her tote, and stepped into the aisle. Cameras raised in awe, phones recording. With every step toward the exit, she carried not just her belongings, but the unmistakable weight of systemic change. By the time Flight 822 reached the gate, the chain reaction was complete. Passengers had witnessed transformation, staff had experienced accountability, and a corporation had recommitted to its founding values. In Seat 1A, the quiet storm of justice had given way to a new dawn, one that no one would soon forget. Julie Reinhardt's legs felt like jelly the moment she stepped off the jet bridge and into the bright fluorescent lights of the Omnis Air emergency meeting area. 20 minutes ago, she'd been cruising through first class with her pristine Navy uniform and clipboard in hand. Now she stood in a narrow corridor, shoulder to shoulder with the rest of Crew 822, each of them clutching their name badges. Their polished smiles evaporated. A stern-faced HR manager, Ms. Patel, waited at the door to a small interview room. Next to her, the airline's legal counsel, Mr. Dawson, balanced a tablet loaded with data, voice recordings, video clips, even AI-generated service time graphs. Julie's throat tightened as she watched him tap through slide after slide under some glowing headings from Veronica's seat, audio of her clipped apology, the nanosecond hesitation when she tucked the confirmation slip into her pocket. "Ms. Reinhardt," Ms. Patel said, voice smooth but unyielding, "please enter." Julie took a shaky breath and slipped inside the room. The door clicked shut behind her. Overhead, a single panel light cast a harsh glow. A small recorder sat on the table between two empty chairs, its red light blinking. Julie swallowed, her pulse pounding in her ears. Mr. Dawson cleared his throat. "Julie," he began, scanning his tablet, "you were present for dinner service on Flight 822 tonight. Do you understand that your actions have been flagged as discriminatory behavior?" Julie's mouth went dry. She managed a nod. I'm not sure what you mean." Her voice trembled. Ms. Patel slid a printed sheet across the table. "This is the service log. You see the time difference? You served Ms. Miles at 1903. You skipped her twice before that. That's a 3-minute delay after serving other passengers. Julie glanced at the paper. Her handwriting on the printout looked neat enough, her own name spelled correctly, but the numbers, 19:00 clock, 19:01, 19:02, and then a gap until 19:04. She swallowed again. There was a system glitch, she blurted. The menu cut off. The POS terminal froze. Mr. Dawson frowned. We have your shift logs. No system outages were recorded. And our AI monitoring captured your comment to the junior attendant. She's probably not worth the effort. Care to explain? Her stomach lurched. She remembered that aside, spoken under her breath. She had laughed with Mr. Emerson in 1C, thinking Ms. Miles was some random upgrade. She had crossed the line. I didn't know, Julie stammered. I thought she was, someone who just didn't pay for the meal. Miles paused. Her head slowly nodded. You did know who she was, Julie. This was Ms. Veronica Miles, CEO of Omnis Air, she said, voice calm but final. She tapped the badge icon on her tablet, and a photo of Veronica's gold CEO badge filled the screen. Julie's breath caught. She'd never imagined she'd served the airline's founder as a regular passenger and then treated her like a nuisance. She wrapped her arms around herself as though shielding her heart. I'm so sorry. Outside, Julie heard muffled sobbing, likely Tina or Eric in the next room. Julie swallowed back tears, but they welled anyway. I never meant, she began, voice cracking. You did, Mr. Dawson replied quietly. And we have 3 prior reports of service bias over the last 2 years, each closed with a note indicating insufficient evidence. Tonight, the evidence is indisputable. Julie pressed her palms flat against the table, trying to steady her trembling fingers. She felt the weight of every luxury tray she had placed before others, and the one cheap sandwich she had handed Miss Miles. Please, she whispered, is there anything I can do to make this right? Ms. Patel exchanged a look with Dawson. Your actions have serious legal and ethical implications. Under company policy, you're suspended pending a full investigation. You will not fly again for Omnis Air. Incident reports will be forwarded to the Transportation Department. Julie closed her eyes, her world tilting. She had lived for this job. Years of training, ribbon stars on her uniform, Employee of the Month plaques on her apartment wall. And now, in this harsh fluorescent room, it was all dissolving. She heard her own shaky inhale, then exhale. I understand, she said, her voice small. Mr. Dawson reached forward and pressed a button on the recorder. This concludes your interview. You may collect your personal items and exit through the rear door. Security will escort you out. Julie rose unsteadily, her knees weak. She forced herself to stand tall, to look at Ms. Patel and Dawson. Any sign of compassion she might have hoped for was absent. Ms. Patel nodded curtly, and Julie turned to go. Outside the room, she almost bumped shoulders with Tina. The junior attendant's eyes were red-rimmed. Julie placed a hand on Tina's arm, weak, apologetic. Tina looked away, her expression a mixture of relief and sorrow. Julie lingered, but Tina slipped past her. In the corridor leading to a staff elevator, security guards waited. Julie's co-workers stood in a line, the ones who had laughed, the ones who had watched. No words passed between them. They shattered the illusion of camaraderie that had bound them through countless flights. When the elevator doors slid shut, Julie saw their reflections. Uniforms unbuttoned, name tags tucked away, heads bowed. She realized how quickly respect can evaporate when prejudice is exposed. Inside the elevator, the hush settled like a cold blanket. Julie pressed the lobby button, her fingertips brushing the stainless steel panel. She closed her eyes, feeling the elevator start its descent. Her chest ached, but beneath the ache was an ember of something else. Regret, yes, but also recognition. She had earned this reckoning. At the ground floor, the elevator dinged. Julie stepped out into the terminal, the bustle of travelers rushing past like a current she no longer belonged to. Security guided her through a side exit. The doors slid closed behind her, and the hum of the airport swallowed her whole. A single thought pulsed in her mind as she walked away from the ominous air gate. She would never forget who sat in 1A, and neither would anyone else. The wheels of Flight 822 screeched against the runway as the jet came to a smooth halt at Chicago O'Hare. A hush fell over the cabin, seatbelt signs clicked off, and soft overhead lights brightened to welcome passengers back to reality. Veronica Miles remained seated in 1A, her posture as composed as ever, watching through the windshield for the moment she'd orchestrated. Before the cabin door even opened, two figures appeared in the doorway. Omnis Air's Chief of Human Resources, Mr. Caldwell, and the airline's lead counsel, Miss Nguyen. They stood, framed by the jet bridge, tablets in hand, expressions unreadable but authoritative. Behind them, a uniformed replacement crew waited, fresh navy jackets, crisp scarves, polite smiles. Mr. Caldwell cleared his throat. His voice carried through the first-class cabin's silent anticipation. Ladies and gentlemen and crew of Flight 822, by executive order of CEO Veronica Miles, your service on this flight is hereby terminated, effective immediately, pending full internal investigation. A printed notice materialized in Mays Nguyen's hand. A concise directive bearing Veronica's encoded signature. She tapped its lines on her tablet, and each passenger's seatback screen lit up with the same message, scrolling elegantly down the display. Julie Reinhardt, standing near the front with the rest of her team, felt her world shift. She swallowed and looked to her colleagues, Tina, Camilla, Eric, each wearing that same stunned, betrayed look. Without a word, they removed their name badges and followed the replacement crew toward the rear exit. Their footsteps echoed softly, carried on a current of shock rather than shame. Passengers leaned forward in their seats, eyes wide. A business traveler in 2C tapped on his phone, capturing the scene. "That's CEO-level accountability right there," he whispered to his neighbor. A woman in 3A dabbed at tears, mouthing, "Finally." A young man in 2B gave a controlled nod, as though acknowledging a hard-won justice. Veronica rose from her seat without breaking stride. She lifted the single reusable water glass in a calm nod to Mr. Caldwell. "Thank you," she said simply. Her voice was quiet but firm, every bit the image of poised leadership. Mr. Caldwell inclined his head and stepped aside. With all eyes on her, Veronica collected her tote, adjusted her scarf, and walked down the aisle. Passengers gave up their seats to let her pass, some applauding softly, others offering respectful smiles. Even the replacement crew paused to bow their heads slightly as she passed, recognizing the woman who had just reshaped their world. Outside the cabin door, a dozen Omnis Air staff waited. Operations managers, media relations officers, even the gate agent. They lined a respectful corridor, silent guardians of the airline's renewed values. The moment Veronica stepped into the jet bridge, the gate agent offered a polite, "Welcome, Ms. Miles. We're ready for you." Veronica paused just long enough to let the weight of the moment settle in the air. She did not look back. She did not need to. Her nod to the assembled staff spoke volumes. Justice had been served, dignity restored. As she boarded the awaiting limousine, she tapped her smartwatch to notify Aaliyah. Flight 822, debrief complete, draft press statement approved, town hall at 8 a.m. A single buzz confirmed delivery. Inside the limo's soft leather seats, Veronica exhaled. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows, but inside everything was crystal clear. She had sat in silence, absorbed the injustice, and then enacted change, so precise it would echo through every level of the company. In 1A, she had been ignored. But today, at 30,000 feet and beyond, she made sure no one would ever forget who sat in that seat. And as the door closed behind her, the gentle click marked not an ending, but the start of a new era. One defined by accountability, respect, and the quiet power of principled leadership. Veronica stepped off the limousine into the soft glow of the boardroom's foyer, her heels clicking with purpose on the marble floor. A small group of Omnisair executives, department heads, and a handful of reporters watched her approach. She paused at the threshold and looked out at them, eyes steady, posture unwavering. No flashbulbs popped, no one shouted questions. There was only the quiet stillness that followed a storm. Inside, the town hall meeting had already begun. Chairs formed a semicircle around a simple podium. Veronica took her place at the center, folding her hands lightly on the lectern. She met the gaze of every colleague and investor, each of whom carried the weight of the last 24 hours. Corrected courses, policy drafts, audit results, and a collective sense that nothing would ever be the same. A hush descended. Veronica drew a slow breath, then spoke in a voice so calm it commanded attention. We set out to deliver a world-class experience. Last night, we fell short of that promise, but tonight, we proved that our values aren't just words on a page, they're actions we live by. She paused, letting the gravity of her words sink in. Then she reached into her pocket and withdrew a single, folded napkin. The linen square that had drifted into her lap mid-flight. She unfolded it, holding it delicately between her fingertips, and let it flutter, as though recalling that moment of small recognition in seat 1A. This napkin, she continued, reminded me that even the smallest gesture can restore dignity. Our job isn't merely to correct mistakes. It's to build a system that never forgets who we serve. Whether you're senior leadership or new hire, whether you're in seat 1A or 24B, you deserve respect and courtesy. She placed the napkin on the lectern, then stepped back. No flourish, no applause cue, only a steady nod. In that silence, her message rang clear. Omnisair had been cleansed by its own failure and reborn with renewed purpose. The room exhaled. A single measured round of applause rose. Respectful, sincere. Veronica allowed herself the faintest of smiles, then turned and walked toward the back exit. She passed the executive assistant, Aaliyah, who caught her eye and gave a discreet thumbs up. No words were exchanged, none were needed. Outside the hall, in the quiet of the evening sky framed by floor-to-ceiling windows, Veronica looked out at the runway lights. The same lights that had guided Flight 822 home now glowed softly in the distance. She spoke the final line, barely above a whisper but heard by those closest. Let this be the last time anyone in 1A feels invisible. Then, without another glance, she turned away, leaving behind a company transformed by a single, quiet act of accountability. As she stepped into the elevator, the door slid shut behind her, and with it closed the chapter on injustice. Ahead lay a new runway, a future where every passenger would know they truly belonged,